Ow. Hey everyone, welcome to Professor Long's Lectures in Anatomy and Physiology. I'm Professor Bob Long. These videos are intended for use by students who are enrolled in my classes, so please learn the terms on our list of things to know and the things that I cover the way that I cover it. If you're in someone else's class, learn what they want you to learn. I hope this helps you in some way, shape, or form. If it does, please hit like and subscribe. Now, if you're in my class and you're on our list of things to know, we're going to be starting on page 26 and working through the list. We're going to start with muscles of the head. Now, I have two models here. A lot of the muscles we can see on the little mannequin, and we'll use them in lab tests. And we have a larger mannequin that comes apart in pieces. So some of the muscles are more easily seen on the larger mannequin. Some are more easily seen on the smaller mannequins. So here's how we look at it. When we're looking at the smaller mannequin, they only show the superficial muscles. Now, some of the muscles are layered one on top of the other. And if we look at the superficial muscle, we could not see the deeper muscle underneath it. So we'll cut and reflect. They use the term reflect or peel the muscle away so we see the deeper muscle. On the smaller mannequins, we only have the superficial muscles. On the larger mannequins, on one side, on the right side of their body, you see all the superficial muscles. Notice it's all muscles and tendons and ligaments and stuff. If I rotate them the other way, I can see some bone tissue here. So we see the deep muscle because the superficial muscles have been cut and reflected. So now I'm going to show you some of these muscles on both models because we can use either the larger ones or the smaller ones for our lab tests. So if you start on the list, the first muscle on our list is called the occipitofrontalis muscle. Now, the occipitofrontalis muscle goes from the occipital bone in the front, from the frontal bone in the front to the occipital bone in the back. So we have a muscle that connects from the frontal bone to the occipital bone. It's called the occipitofrontalis muscle. And then that muscle has actually a belly on the frontal bone, there's a belly on the occipital bone, and then there's a tendon that connects them. I'm going to try to show you a little more close up on this mannequin. So you can see this muscle that covers the frontal bone here. If I look on top of his head, there's this big flat tendon that covers the cranium, and then we have this little bone, this little muscle back here that would be over the occipital bone. Technically, that's all called the occipitofrontalis. And one way that we learn it is we say there's the occipitofrontalis muscle with the frontal belly, and the occipitofrontalis muscle has a occipital belly. You could also simply call this the frontalis muscle. And you could also call this the occipitalis muscle. You don't have to say occipitofrontalis, frontal belly, occipitofrontalis, occipital belly. If I asked you to ID that muscle, you could say occipitalis. If I asked you to identify this muscle, you could say frontalis. Same here, this is the frontalis muscle. Now, epicranial means uppermost or on top of the cranium, and aponeurosis would be the flat tendon. So if I look at this little mannequin, I can see the frontalis muscle here, the occipitalis muscle here, and I see all of this gray tendon on top of his head. That is called the epicranial aponeurosis. Epicranial aponeurosis. Got it? Good. Now, one of the muscles on the list talks about this muscle that makes a ring around the eye. You can see it here and you see it here. The muscle that encircles or makes a ring around the eye is called the orbicularis oculi. Orbicularis oculi. Got it? There's another muscle that makes a ring around the mouth, and you can see part of it right here, almost like a little mustache above the upper lip. This muscle makes a complete ring around the mouth, and it is called the orbicularis oris muscle, from oral, from mouth. That muscle, by the way, has some other muscles that cover it that help move our face and make smiles and the Elvis Presley and frowns and things, okay? Now, around the eye, we have the orbicularis oculi, but then there's a muscle here, or actually there's two muscles here that move the corner of your mouth. And those are called the zygomaticus major and the zygomaticus minor. And the minor is not on our list, okay? So you can see the zygomaticus muscle here going from the zygomatic arch down towards the corner of the mouth. And you can see it right here on this mannequin. It's called the zygomaticus major and the zygomaticus minor. Now, there's another muscle, and it's kind of hard to see. If I look at this mannequin, I can see where the mandible is, and I can see several pieces of muscle tissue here. We're not going to name all the muscles. There's a large muscle that covers the entire ramus of the mandible, and that is called the masseter muscle, and you can see the masseter muscle right here as well. Now, on this model, it's really hard to see because there's several other muscles obscuring it, but there's a muscle that runs along the body of the mandible underneath all of this, running right through here. And if I rotate this mannequin around, it's running right here next to the mandible. If I rotate this mannequin around, you can see they've removed or reflected the masseter and a bunch of other muscles, the zygomaticus and some others. And this muscle running right here along the body of the mandible is called the, I just drew a blank. The buccinator muscle. I'm sorry, I drew a blank on it for some reason. I couldn't recall it. That one's called the buccinator muscle. Buccinator comes from boca, mouth, and buccaneer. So that would be the buccinator muscle there, and it runs real deep inside of here. So for a quick review, we have the frontalis muscle. We have the frontalis muscle here. On this mannequin, if I flip him around, I can also see the occipitalis muscle. And then the tendon that connects the two is called the epicranial aponeurosis. I have the orbicularis oculi and the orbicularis oris. I have the zygomaticus major. I have the masseter muscle and the buccinator muscle. They're a little harder to see on this mannequin, but there would be a masseter and a buccinator running here. Okay. Now on this mannequin, since we've cut and reflected this muscle that sits over the side here, this muscle actually happens to be called the parieto-temporalis muscle. It's been cut and reflected on the other side, but all of this muscle that sits over the temporal bone, runs through the zygomatic arch and pulls on the coronoid process, happens to be called the temporalis muscle. We cannot see the temporalis muscle on the smaller mannequins because they left the temporoparietalis or parieto-temporalis muscle covering it. But here you can see the temporalis muscle. Finally, there's a large muscle that would run from the clavicle here all the way up to the mastoid process. That is called the sternocleidomastoid muscle, and you see it here. Here's the clavicle. Here's the sternocleidomastoid muscle. It's called the sternocleidomastoid muscle. So let me make sure I covered everything that's on the list. Yep. Those are all the muscles that cover the head. I want you to learn those. I want you to see if you can identify them on your own from the pictures that you've downloaded online. Hope you had as much fun as I did. See you in the next video.